Implicit in the statement that new theory views literary artists as cultural conmen and flunkies is the notion that the key difficulty of this question, this is a difficult question, the key difficulty of this is to find the reference. The passage talks about new theory. We have literary artists or literateurs as cultural conmen and flunkies. Conmen, those who cheat other people, basically thieves, cheats, robbers, etc. Flunkies, those who are basically goons to bosses who do bad things, maybe mob bosses. That's more of a specific reference, but here we are talking about metaphorical flunkies. Now, the passage is extremely against the idea of literature. Literature, it suggests, is full of deception. In particular, we see quite a few references to this. The second last paragraph says, to Plato, the poets were a band of deceivers. But what we need is particularly in the second paragraph. Here is where we also find not the direct reference, but the suggestion that literary artists, poets as such, writers as such, they are cultural conmen and flunkies. The second paragraph says, over the past 2 decades, theorists have sought to reveal art's long suppressed kinship with propaganda, pornography, and the language of imperial oppression. Seen in theory's bleaching light, great poets no longer appear as ideals of wisdom or of human triumph against the odds. Now they are to be approached as shrewd deceivers, tour guides to dreamy, detached lotus worlds, apologists for race and gender oppression, bagmen for the bourgeoisie. Now, in this phrase, deceivers, tour guides to dreamy, detached lotus worlds, apologists for race and gender oppression, bagmen for the bourgeoisie, we find poets, great poets, or literary artists mentioned as, suggested to be cultural conmen and flunkies. So let us look at the options. Option A says, great novels and poetry do not truly reflect the milieu from which they emerge. Now, when we say milieu, it's a very uncommon word. What we mean is the social background, the social circumstances, social environment that a person or a thing develops from. This is incorrect. Great novels and poetry, or literature in general, does not truly reflect the milieu from which it emerges. This is wrong. We can see this from the first line of this paragraph. Over the past 2 decades, theorists have sought to reveal art's long suppressed kinship with propaganda, pornography, and the language of imperial oppression. In propaganda, in particular, also pornography and the language of imperial oppression, we are talking about aspects of the social and cultural environment. And great novels and poetry do not reflect this. That is incorrect, because theorists have sought to reveal art's long suppressed kinship with these aspects. Now, kinship, relation, but long suppressed, it is not that this relationship is incorrect or it doesn't exist or that it is misleading. It has just been suppressed because great poets are deceivers, as we see here, at least according to the passage. So theorists have sought to reveal art's long suppressed, hidden, camouflaged relation with these aspects, which are aspects of their social environment, the milieu from which they emerge. So great novels and poetry, literature in general, it reflects the milieu from which they emerge. It is just that this reflection, it is not very apparent. It is hidden. It is camouflaged. So this is incorrect. It is contradictory to the passage. Option B says, poets and dramatists reject point of view narration in favor of objective truths. Now, both of these aspects, point of view narration and objective truths, both of these are in a way distorted. Point of view narration does not exist in the passage. This is a reference outside the premise because we don't see any aspect of narration as such in the passage. What point of view does narration have? Who is the narrator? That has not been mentioned in the passage. So that is completely outside the premise. And then again, of objective truths, we have the aspect of eternal truths. But poets, dramatists reject point of view narration in favor of objective truths, as in, to simplify, poets and dramatists, writers, literatures, are in favor of objective truths, or they prefer objective truths. That is also incorrect. Now, we don't have objective truths here, we have eternal truths. They are not exactly the same thing, but even if we allow this, this statement is also contradictory to the passage. We see it here. Theory offered illusions, mere imitations of imitations, whereas life's highest purpose is to seek eternal truths. So eternal truths or objective truths, if we take them to be the same thing, that is life's highest purpose. That is not what literature gives us. The same paragraph here says, conversely, the knowledge that you glean from reading literature is messy, undefined, without focus. So this is contradictory to eternal truths. And yet again, poets have been established here and here as deceivers. So poets and dramatists favor objective truths is quite incorrect. This is definitely opposite to what the passage suggests. So B is incorrect, B is out. Option C tells us literature caters to the cultural biases of the ruling class. This is interestingly almost a direct reference. We see cultural biases of the ruling class. We see propaganda, the language of imperial oppression. We see deceivers, tour guides to dreamy detached lotus worlds. Then also, more importantly, apologists for race and gender oppression, bagmen for the bourgeoisie. And in bagmen for the bourgeoisie, we find that this is essentially true. Now, the language here is extremely complex and uncommon. That is the problem. That is the hurdle, the hiccup. But what does this suggest? Bourgeoisie means basically the ruling class. Bagmen is a term that is used for goons who essentially work for the government. So in the older system, especially the time of the Cold War, those who were government employees, not government employees, basically the point men of the government, they would often take people who would stand against the government. So these people, what they would do is they would put bags on people's heads, people who spoke against the government, people who had rebellious ideas, who believed in free speech, etc., who did not buy the deception that the government was presenting, who basically stood against some of the ideas of the government. These people would be bagged, they would be black bagged, and they would be taken away. They would be taken away to prison, in fact, or they might be taken to interrogation, or might be put under torture. So bagman essentially is a very negative term for a government employee who is essentially a goon, someone who has been hired to basically ensure that the government's image is it remains untouched, and there are no people who question the government. So bagmen for the bourgeoisie, essentially flunkies, essentially goons, people working for generals, for not generals is not a very good word, but then people who work for the ruling class. And so literature, great poets, caters to the cultural biases of the ruling class. That is definitely something that we can infer from all of these references. So C is the correct choice. Option D says, the ruling class does not, by and large, embrace the moral values and social norms that its literature advocates. There are two problems with this. First off, this is an inversion. We see that poets, great poets, or writers or literatures, they were the bagmen for the ruling class. This option inverts that and says the ruling class does not embrace the values and norms of the literature of literature. So we cannot say that, because the passage says literature catered to the ruling class. We cannot say that the ruling class did or did not agree with or did not believe in the same things as literature did. So first off, the inversion is a distortion. We cannot say that this is true. We cannot make this judgment. Second, the ruling class does not, all right, but embrace the moral values and social norms that its literature advocates. Now, how can we say that literature advocates moral values and social norms? Social norms is general, but moral values suggests that literature was positive. The ruling class was bad. It did not agree with the same moral values that the literature advocated. But literature has been presented as being the bad guy here, seen in the theories bleaching lights. uh, Great poets no longer appear as the ideals of wisdom or of human triumph against the odds. Now they are to be approached as shrewd deceivers, tour guides to dreamy detached lotus worlds, apologists for race and gender oppression, bagmen for the bourgeoisie. So this also is incorrect because it goes against the idea presented in the passage. The passage repeatedly tells us that literature is not good. It does not have moral values. We see it in the second last paragraph also. The poets were a band of deceivers. The knowledge that you glean from reading literature is messy, undefined, without focus. So we cannot say that it has any moral values as such. So D is also incorrect. The correct answer is option C.